always putting things up to the last minute, it's really going to have an impact on your physical and mental exhaustion. You're going to feel overwhelmed. What happens if those creative juices don't kick in, right?
Hi everyone, and welcome. I'm Marie-Blanche, the host of the Student Wellness Project. This is a podcast for students who want to not only survive the semester, but actually thrive. Welcome to the show, everyone. This is the second episode of the Student Wellness Project, and today we're doing our part 2 of our time management topic with a guest expert coming on to the show. Dr. Lamonde is going to be joining us today to talk about how time management relates to our mental health and how we can use a few strategies to make the most out of our time and leave procrastination behind. And just a little side note before we get started, both Dr. Lamonde and I speak French as our first language, so if ever you hear the word agenda, we mean planner or calendar, not an agenda for a meeting. And similarly, by the word session, we mean semester or term, and not a session at the gym or anything. I had a really great time chatting with Dr. Lamonde today, and I think our conversation pretty much speaks for itself. So let's jump right into it, and I'll see you on the other side. Dr. Lamonde is a clinical psychologist and supervisor and has been working with children, teens, and their families since receiving her doctoral degree from the University of Ottawa in 2003. She spent most of her career working at Centre Le Cap in Ottawa, a children's mental health agency providing services to the Francophone community in the National Capital Region. During her 15 years at the agency, she worked in various program settings and contributed to the transformation of services in order for children and adolescents to receive the services they need when they need it most. Dr. Lamonde is now providing clinical supervision at the Center for Psychological Services and Research of the University of Ottawa to doctoral students doing their practicum and internships in the child and family stream. She also maintains a small private practice. And she actually also turns out to be my mom. So, hi, Mom.
Hi, Marie. How are you doing?
It's weird to hear you say my name in English, but I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I'm super excited to be doing this with you, and thanks for coming on to the show.
My pleasure.
So the reason I wanted to have you as a guest on the podcast is because I feel like throughout my life, from even elementary and high school, which listeners might be thinking, what about middle school? If you haven't guessed from our names and our little accent, we're from Quebec, where there's no middle school. We go from being little children to teenagers in the blink of an eye, apparently. So, as I was saying, from elementary and high school to even university at some degree, I feel like I've had pretty good time management strategies. And of course, there's some ups and downs, and there are some weeks that I feel like I'm barely hanging on. But my feeling like I'm barely hanging on looks different from other people, I think, because I'm still, eating properly, going to class, and getting decent sleep. I never pull all-nighters, and I feel like I probably owe it to you.
Oh, thank you.
You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing you kind of taught me this at some point in my life.
Yeah, probably a little bit of vicarious training there on our parts. So, baby steps all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, since you're a psychologist, you were a student for a very long time.
Yes.
And now you see secondhand through being my mom and through mentoring your doctorate students. So you see pretty clearly how busy students are, and I'm sure you remember it as well. We try really hard to balance school, work, family, friends, and all of that, and it always feels like we don't have enough time. So can you help us take a step back and tell us a little bit about time management? What is it in essence, and what does it help us accomplish? Let's just really go back to basics.
Okay. So going back to basics, I think for time management, the most important thing is making whatever is invisible visible. Because when you're a student, especially when you're doing that transition from high school to university, high school is pretty structured. You go to school every morning, you end at the end of the day, you have teachers giving you the homework assignments. Whereas when you transition to university, first thing you notice is, wow, there's a lot more space, right? There's more space in your schedule. And profs do give you your assignments in advance, but it's in a document and it's kind of gets hidden away and it's not as visible. It's not in your face. Your schedule is not as routine. And that makes it a lot harder for time management, especially if you've never gotten into that kind of habit of making things invisible, visible. And what I mean by that is putting your assignment due dates, your exams in your agenda and having reminders of when those things happen. The other thing that students kind of forget, and I think it comes back to what you were saying about, trying to balance your social life, trying to balance like good habits, like, such as, training and trying to manage the new responsibilities, especially if you're a student who has an apartment for the first time, like doing your groceries and meals, and how do you do all of that and still be sane? I don't know.
Gotta keep yourself alive.
Exactly. And I know for some people, food is really, really important, right?
Oh, I wonder who that could be.
I don't know if I'm referring to. Anyways, so having that balance is really, really hard, especially if you don't plan in advance. So planning, which is part of time management, is really important. And, time management has to be flexible at the same time. So it's not creating a routine that becomes so rigid that you have to wake up at exactly the same time every day or else you're screwed. That's not what we're talking about. You also have to be flexible in terms of where you do your tasks, right? So to create that environment that's the best for you for studying, for sure. But I think one of the things that happens too is that because you don't plan when and how you intend on studying, then procrastination is the thing that gets a lot of students. So I'll start working after I've checked my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, podcasts, type of things. Or I can't write right now because I need to watch this TV show, or my friends are video gaming right now, so I'll just join their video game session. Or I'll be going out with my friends and having fun. Which are all things that you need to have to incorporate to create that balance and to not feel like you're always studying. But at the same time, if you're always procrastinating, then you're just going to increase your stress, because what will happen is you'll be pulling all-nighters, whether it's to write an exam, to study for an exam, or to write a paper. And that just leads to a lot of more bad habits on the one side, but also a lot of stress and anxiety that if you would, again, make the invisible visible by creating a little bit more structure and using your agenda and working on time management skills, you wouldn't feel as much.
Yeah,
did
okay.
you know? Wait. Did you know I have to plug this in. Did you know that 50% of university students say that they procrastinate in a consistent and problematic manner? 50%!
That's a very high percentage. Like, procrastinate period is one thing, but I think the key word in what you just said was like constantly in problematic way. Like that's pretty serious. So we can go into a bit into the tools, and then let's come back to procrastination. Once we have our plan set, how can we make sure that we're making the best use of that plan and not procrastinating, or at least not procrastinating in a problematic way? Just enough.
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay. So you talked about making the invisible visible, which I really like. That's a cool term or phrase. What concrete tools or practices can you recommend to students that are listening in order to better manage their time?
First thing is use your calendar. Your calendar is your best friend. And check on it. So one of the things that I would recommend you do at the very beginning of a session is to, in your calendar, put your classes in, put the labs that you would have as well. Like if you have sessions where the TA is available to answer your questions, put that in your agenda and color code it. Make it fun. It doesn't have to be boring. I know for a long time you were using a bullet journal.
Yeah, I'm still using it. Yeah, I love color coding, and it just helps me visualize things a lot better. Like I am doing the whole semester at a glance thing. So I have my 4 months of my semester, and then I circle little dates, all in the same color, but then right underneath the month, I have all the assignments with a date associated, and it's just like a little rainbow of colors, but it also tells me which class requires the most attention every month.
Exactly. So it doesn't need to be on the computer, right? You use the tool, the type of agenda or calendar that works for you, but making it fun by color coding it, so that it also brings like reference points really easily.
Yeah, you don't have to go and read the information necessarily, or at least you have some visual cue.
That's right. So putting all of those classes in, indicating when your assignments are due. And I also like, that's more of a, well, no, sorry, you can do it anyway, but I also like putting in reminders for those due papers. So it's not just about putting the due date, but, you know, have a reminder 2 weeks prior or something in that vicinity saying, oh, I have to have these specific things done for that assignment. Yeah. So that you're not rushing at the last minute. The other thing is to actually open up your calendar. So once you've done all that, create a routine, a little habit. It's either, you know, you every Sunday evening or Sunday during the day to check what's coming up during the week. And if there's something special that you've kind of put aside or forgotten about, maybe, again, use that highlighter, use the colors on your agenda to just highlight it so that you know that that is due that week, or that you have something in particular you need to look at. Open your agenda, your calendar every morning to see what's coming up. I even do that, and, you know, sometimes I miss things. You know, you kind of rely on your memory, and you rely on the fact that, oh yeah, I know what's coming this week. I don't need to look. Wrong.
There are surprises. There are surprises for sure.
Absolutely. So doing that and creating that habit is a very good one, just to, bring everything more relevant to mind.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I sometimes forget to do, is allowing time for planning into my schedule. But today is a Friday, and I started planning the week ahead already, because we can go into that a bit later. But especially with online and hybrid school, I feel like I need to set better boundaries of when I'm working, when I'm not working. So I like to keep one day of the weekend off as much as possible. The little tasks like doing my groceries and stuff like that, I'll probably do on that day, but no school, no work, just breathe, reset, and that's my day on the weekend. So I like to get my next week planned ahead before that day on the weekend, so that I can just really enjoy, be in the moment, and not think about that.
Absolutely. And I like what you said about boundaries, right? To have those times really become sacred to you, so that you protect your well-being by doing that. By having those moments where you say, okay, from this time to this time every day, there's no schoolwork involved. Some students decide that, evenings are really awful for me. I'm a morning person and not a night owl. So I need to make sure that by 7:00 I've done what I need to do, so that I can switch off at 7.
Yeah, and everyone's different. So I think we all have friends. We all talk to our friends about how we do these things. But it's so important to be able to know yourself and the way you work, so that you're not taking your friends' habits as your own if they don't work for you. So you need to adapt, and it's going to take time, and we can get to that a bit later, but it's going to take some time and adjustment to find the perfect recipe for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I like to talk about AFLOs.
Yes, I love that so much.
So, AFLOs, for those who don't know, is another fucking learning opportunity. And as a student, you're going to have many of those. It's part of the process. It's part of learning how to learn, and also learning how to respond or reach the professor's expectations. And you have to give yourself the permission to make mistakes.
Yeah, so important.
You have to give yourself permission to not know, and ask questions. That's a whole other topic, right?
Yes.
Having the courage to go see the prof and say, I'm not sure what you're actually expecting of me. Maybe another podcast, Marie.
Yeah, definitely another episode.
But that being said, the whole learning how to use time management is a process. You're not going to do it all in you're not going to do it all in one session and master it. You need to learn what your style is, and what are your own pitfalls or your own obstacles, and work on them. And then those can be your mini objectives for the next term or next session, and in trying to improve on those little bad habits that you might have.
I've definitely noticed that I do set those little goals for myself. Like, my goal for this semester was to get started on assignments, starting week 1, do whatever I could to get my first assignments done quick, because I know that sometimes just having that little week where you're a bit ahead can have like a domino effect on the rest of your semester.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went through step 1, use your calendar. Step 2, open up your calendar. What comes after that? Is there anything else?
You know, one thing that I really think it kind of rewards you is crossing things off your list.
Mm-hmm.
So as you go along and you've completed things, you can, you know, cross it off either in your paper agenda, or change the color of it in your electronic agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, one of the things that I would do for myself, because, you know, as a psychologist, you have to write notes. You have your appointments with your clients, and one of the things that I would do is, once I did my session notes, I would actually change the color of that particular appointment. So visually, I know it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And I can move on. And if at the end of the week, I would always do a recap, like, have I completed everything that I was supposed to do during the week? And that's something that you can do too as a student. Okay, I had all these assignments or tasks that needed to be done. Are they done?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can change a color or cross them off your list, so that you know that you've succeeded. You know, you've completed your week, and that one day during the weekend that you're actually going to enjoy, it will have that freeing effect for you.
Yeah. And just in terms of contingency plans, I think it's also important. What I've started doing is I started leaving a half hour to an hour. It always depends on how free my day is. If I have tons of classes, tons of meetings, it'll probably be half an hour. But if it's a big day for me to do things, I'll leave an hour at the end of the day I'll leave it free in my calendar as a contingency plan. So if something takes up more time than I anticipated, I have it free to complete that. Right. And then something that I'm working on with my therapist is trying to give future Marie Blanche some gifts. So if I leave 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. free on one day, and I completed everything I needed to complete by 4, well, depending on how I'm doing, if it was a really hard day and I'm just really, really, really tired, then it's okay to take that hour off for self-care, because I completed all I needed to do. I'm on track. But if I do have that little amount of energy left at the end of the day, and I have that hour or that half hour that I can work on more stuff, then I can give future me or tomorrow me a little gift. And I think that thinking about it that way, instead of being like, oh yeah, yay, more stuff to do, woohoo, it never ends. I think changing that mentality to, oh, what can I do for tomorrow me, really helps to get ahead a bit.
Exactly. And those little tasks sometimes, you know, that are boring or that you won't really feel like doing the next day might be the ones that at the end of the day, it's okay. I can get these done. I have a little bit of energy left. I'll just get them done. And then you start off fresh the next day. You know, that just reminds me that there's one thing that I didn't mention is we talked about, you know, putting in your classes and your labs, but also putting in specific times for studying.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about flexibility, and yes, you should be flexible with yourself, but, blocking off chunks of time to do some work is really important as well. Because if you look at your calendar and all you see is free time, what do you think your brain is actually registering at that point in time? It's actually thinking, hey, I don't have anything to do. Woo! Let's go meet my friends. Let's do some Facebooking. Well, okay, no Facebook, TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get with the times, Mom.
Oh, yes. And having that visual again will kind of train your brain into saying, okay, well, this is the time that I've put aside to do some of the readings or do some of the research. And that's where you can play a little bit with knowing yourself and knowing when are the best times to do readings versus actual writing work. I know that in the mornings I'm better at doing some of the readings and being able to stay focused. Whereas if I try to do that in the afternoon, a lot of my brain just can't focus at that point in time.
Yeah. Well, okay. So now we have our little steps, our little chunks of work to do for time management. Let's come back to procrastination. We have our plan. Depending on what works for you, we have either the next week plan, the next few days plan, the next day planned. So how do we make sure that we're following the plan and not falling into procrastination?
Right. So we talked a little bit earlier about how procrastination is so frequent with students. So, being a little recognizing that that's part of student life is one thing. And I think it's important to figure out what style of procrastinator you are. So what are the reasons that you procrastinate? And for some students, it's really not having those really concrete goals. So being very vague about when and how they're going to study or when and how they're going to do their work. So that's where the time management and the agenda really helps out.
Yeah.
And some really feel overwhelmed. And that's the other thing, is that if you actually take time to plan your whole session, the whole 4 months in a glance, and then, step down, that will also help with the feeling of overwhelm, because if you'll have it in more digestible bites, what you need to do. But some students, the reasons why they procrastinate is that they're anxious. So they not sure if they're doing the right thing, or they not sure if they're actually understanding the assignment properly. They don't want to fail, so they're always looking at others to see how they're doing things, and second guessing themselves, I guess, is one of the things. And then you have also the other types of students who, because they fear failure or because they want to keep their grades up, they become very perfectionistic. So you have some students who postpone writing because they're watching TV or video games or going out. But you have also some students who postpone by continuously perfecting their work, not being able to let go, that they pursue the tasks continuously, and that's also part of the reasons that some procrastinate.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, even I remember as a student that I had that issue, especially in graduate school. I got to the point where I was at some times asking for extensions because I always felt like I wasn't doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not because necessarily you're putting off things. Sometimes it's also because you're getting too engrossed in things as well in your work.
Yeah, so it's a whole journey of getting to know yourself.
Absolutely. And that's the journey of life, isn't it?
Yeah, and wow, I feel like that could be a whole other episode in itself, but I just want to talk about it really quick. That's the performance anxiety. Procrastination is definitely the one that has impacted me most throughout my academic career. And for me, it's actually not that I can't let things go. I know when something is done, but when I don't know exactly how to start something, like it's a new type of assignment that I haven't really done before, I get paralyzed. I'm like a deer in the headlights. I'm frozen. And then it takes some time to get started on it. And what has really helped me is time management. So scheduling like even 30 minutes ahead of when I think I want to start working on something. Just scheduling that 30 minutes ahead of time to sit down in front of my computer, look at an assignment rubric or at the assignment guidelines, and just let it sink in. I don't have to do any work after that. I just have to look at it. If I have some ideas, I can start exploring them, but it's really just planning that time. And then what happens is that your brain kind of stews that information and between that time that you sat down and the time that you start working on it. And that can give you ideas before you want to start doing your research, if it's an assignment or an essay assignment. I mean, that'll give you ideas, and it's really, really helped me. So if anyone else out there is feeling the same as I am, that's also a really good tool.
Yeah, I like that strategy. Definitely a good one to implement.
Yeah, and it definitely took me way too much time to figure it out. So I'm trying to give our listeners little gifts as well.
Ah, very sweet. And there's one last thing about procrastination that I think I want to mention, because it's something that I've heard so many times before. And it's I don't need time management. I don't need to use my agenda. It doesn't really matter. I'm a last minute kind of person, and doing things at the last minute, it like sparks my creative juices, and that's just how I work.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think you can do once or twice. And it's kind of in the category of sensation seeking, that pressure, that adrenaline that gets kicked in, makes you more into doing some of the more boring assignments. I think that's when it actually happens the most.
Yeah.
But that's really a double-edged sword, right? Because if you're always putting things up to the last minute, it's really going to have an impact on your physical and mental exhaustion. You're going to feel overwhelmed. What happens if those creative juices don't kick in, right? Because how many of students out there have been faced with a blank computer screen and just cannot get started on that assignment, or cannot get some of those ideas out. And if you're always leaving things to the last minute because it's worked for you in the past, at some point it just won't work no more. And you're going to crash.
Because there's a certain level of stress that you need as a human being to get activated and do something. But then there's a level of stress that does the opposite and is very paralyzing. So
absolutely. It just tips things over.
Yeah, if you're looking at that blank page and you're stressing about the page being blank, then it's just a whole vicious cycle that keeps reinforcing itself.
Right. And we're talking about that in terms of writing assignments, but you can also think about it in terms of exams. If you're always leaving things to the last minute to study, you might still be able to pull off the grades, but the thing is it's not going to sink in. You're not giving your brain that repeated exposure to the material that will help your memory, and you're not going to give yourself the chance to be able to build on that knowledge in the future, because every time you're going to have a new course, it'll be all new material for you. You won't remember what you've learned in the past.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, from one year to the next, you're actually supposed to be accumulating knowledge that will help you out with the next year or next term.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 last questions to wrap this up. One is, how long will it take? And obviously it's different for everyone, so we're looking for a ballpark answer. But how long will it take for time management to become a habit, or for students to just feel a little improvement in their life?
So I think 21 days is about what will get you into the habit of doing it. And sometimes it's nice to just reward yourself or track it so that you see that you've been doing it for a while. And it is something that you will benefit from for the rest of your life. So if we're thinking about being in university, but at some point you'll maybe get a job, or you'll be doing contract work and you're going to have to manage more than one agenda at a time, right? Or project at a time. And so these skills that nobody really teaches time management when you're in high school. But anyways, these skills that you're learning in doing this time management stuff, you're going to be using for your whole life. So get cracking.
Yeah. And okay, so 21 days for it to become a bit more automatic, and you'll feel the benefits forever if you keep it up, but also keep in mind that it's a process and it's going to need tweaking. If I take myself as an example, I have very different techniques now in my 4th year compared to my 1st year. So there's always going to be some new things that pop up, little areas that you can improve on, little tools that you discover along the way that like revolutionize your way of doing time management, because there's always some people developing new apps, new everything. So just be compassionate with yourself and give yourself the time to hone that skill.
Yeah. And I think one of the ones that is a takeaway for me in terms of apps is that focus app that you were using to keep yourself on task. It's part of time management as well, in the sense that, you're giving yourself some very focused time, but also taking breaks along the way.
Yeah.
That one was, I think, really good for you, because it gave you the opportunity to not feel bad about taking breaks.
Exactly, and not taking too long of a break either. We've talked about time management, what it is, what it helps us accomplish, what are the benefits of managing our time better, and what tools and practices that students can use in order to better manage their time, how to deal with procrastination, and how long it'll take for a habit to sink in and for time management to create a positive impact on students' life. Thank you so much, Dr. Lamonde, to have illuminated time management a bit for us today. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Well, it's always a pleasure having conversations with you, Marie.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that students will give you some feedback on these tools and how they've put them in place.
Mm-hmm.
It's always interesting to see what are the takeaways of your listeners. So
yeah,
looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, and maybe what tools that I and Dr. Lamonde don't even know about that maybe we can share with the community eventually. Yeah, so again, thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the show, and well, I'll definitely be talking to you soon.
I sure hope so. And thank you for having me on this show, and again, I hope that students will have some takeaways, and if ever there's anything else we can chat about, I enjoyed this.
Cool.
Wow, that was a really interesting conversation, and I know it went a lot of places, but hopefully you had as much fun listening to it as I did. And we sure covered a lot, so I just wanted to give you guys a little recap of what we talked about today so you can bring the strategies you learned about into your lives. So first of all, we talked about making the invisible visible. And that's the idea of compiling all of your syllabi, all the deadlines from your multiple courses into one calendar. And then it might be a good idea to schedule reminders ahead of those due dates so you think about them in advance. And when you're working on this master calendar, you obviously want to block off the time that you're in class, but you also want to be blocking off chunks of time dedicated to studying and working on assignments, because you want to avoid your brain seeing all this empty space in your calendar and being tricked into thinking that you have tons of time. And every week you want to be setting more concrete goals for each day regarding which class or project you'll be working on at what time. And we also learned about AFLOs, another fucking learning opportunity. Yep, my mom taught me that. And as frustrating as they can be in the moment, we often learn from our mistakes, so don't be too hard on yourself if your plan doesn't work out the first time around. You're going to need readjusting, and that's fine. So once you have that plan, you're all set for a successful semester, right? Well, technically yes, but we do have a tendency to procrastinate, which is normal and fine, but we need to keep it in check. And to do so, you might want to look into the reasons why you procrastinate. Is it because you haven't set clear goals for your day or week? Is it because you find that assignment boring? Is it because you're tired, didn't get enough sleep? Is it because you're stressed about thinking about the exam or the assignment, let alone trying to work on it? Once you've identified your procrastination type, it'll be easier to find strategies to keep it at bay. And finally, we talked about how long it'll take until time management becomes a habit. The general idea is about 21 days, but really, as long as you stay consistent with it, repetition will eventually turn it into a habit. It'll be a lot easier to engage in it. And it's also important to know that it's okay and often needed to change time management strategies. You should experiment with what works for you. And that's it for this episode, friends. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please like the episode and leave me a comment. It really helps me create the next episode in a way that'll be interesting for you. And talking about next episode, next week we're going to be talking about resilience with Dr. Diana Breacher. So as we enter final seasons, I hope that this episode will especially help you to catch your breath and finish strong. If you don't want to miss that episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. And that is it for today. See you next week.